Hello and welcome to the second episode of Discography Discussion, where we take a deep dive on a certain artist's or group or band's studio albums. And today we're talking about the Chemical Brothers. A bit of small fame from, I'd say, the early 2000s and 90s back in the UK, and a little bit of fame here in the US, mostly known for their really hard hitting and percussional electronica music, and I absolutely love it. But before we do start this episode, and as much as I'd love to just start this episode, we do have to talk a little bit about something that happened after I uploaded the second video. There just so happens to be a podcast that is also named Discography Discussion, and while for a while I did maybe think about changing the name of the show, seeing as we're both in two different mediums, I don't necessarily feel the need to. And also, seeing as both of us are kind of small, with not really a whole bunch of views, I also still don't feel the need to change the name of the show. So I'm sorry if that sounds like I'm being disrespectful of any kind, but I'm not trying to be. I would just rather keep our formats in two totally different things. If you do, though, I will leave a link down in the description just this once, and you can go ahead and check their podcast out. It is also called Discography Discussion. I would say the main difference, though, between the two of us is theirs is a podcast, mine isn't, and theirs is all focused on only metal albums, whereas I'm focused on every genre of music. Now that that's over with, let's get on with the next episode. Or what? Next episode? Jeez. Anyway, let's get on with the albums. Ugh. The first album we have is Exit Planet Dust, which was their first album, or rather their first studio album. They had a lot of EPs and LPs in the earlier 90s. Um, and they were originally known as the Dust Brothers. And once they decided that they had to change names to become the Chemical Brothers, they came up with an album and they called it Exit Planet Dust. Came out in 1995, only has 11 tracks, and it's only 49 minutes long, so it's actually the shortest of all of their albums. And honestly, the only one that really goes anywhere near under 50 minutes. Um, I like the album a lot. It has a lot of that really old school, like I said, percussion of like these drums and a lot of just drums and a lot of other things mixed in with electronica really well, as well as some weird sort of vocals coming from Liam Gallagher, the singer of Oasis, and some other features that aren't necessarily named in the songs they're in, but you can definitely tell when they're in there. It's it's fine. I think it's a really good album. Um, I believe it's this album. Yeah, it is this album that has my favorite song from them though, and it's called "Playground for a Wedgeless Firm," which is um, what I would call the perfect epitome of everything that I like about them. If you play that one song, and it is here on YouTube if you want to look it up, of course. Um, that one song is basically what I would say encompasses their entire style, and I love that song. It's a great song. But moving on to Dig Your Own Hole, which came out in 1997, so 2 years later. Again, 11 tracks, and this one was actually 63 minutes, their longest album out of all of the nine, I think maybe 10 that we're talking about. No, nine today. Their longest album. Really good. Furthering that style from the first one, definitely improving a little bit more. A couple more vocals here and there. Some really good songs, like Piku, which is I think my favorite song off of the whole album. And I think one or two of the songs on this album actually kind of left just the UK, because I would say most of these albums up until a little like into the mid 2000s, most of these albums and the music stood within the UK, whereas some of the songs actually on here did make it out to the US and sort of entered the club and dance scene with people. But a really good album again. But again, it's a long one, and so this would definitely be something to play while wasting time, maybe playing a video game or whatever. But it's definitely a long one, something you're going to want to waste that time with. And our next album, Surrender. Another really good album. Came out in 1999, again, another 2 years later. 11 tracks again in 58 minutes. Yeah, really good album. Furthering, again, although I do. There is a bit of a step back. Some of the vocals on certain songs are just a little too weird for me, maybe. um, like Hey Boy Hey Girl, as good as the actual electronical and like the instrumentals in that song, that is really good. I just can't. I just don't like the vocals very much. They're just not very enjoyable. But uh, a really good album. Again, another one that you're gonna maybe want to waste time with because it's kind of long, you know. And that's I'm gonna say just so I can stop repeating myself. That trend kind of goes through with all of the albums here on out. They're all very long, and they're not really meant for anything other than maybe a really big amount of wasted time, or if you really want to sit down and listen to the albums. But yeah, Surrender, really good album, but again, step backs with a lot more vocals than the past two have so far. And again, the vocals are just too weird for me. But and the fourth album, Come With Us, came out in 2002. It's actually 3 years later. Only 10 tracks. Not their shortest amount because there was another album with also 10 tracks. 54 minutes. Eh, long, but whatever. Kind of a forgettable album. A lot of really good instrumentals every here and there, but none of them that really stood with me, or none of them that I went, wow, I really like this song. Um, like even I would say on the last album, Surrender, I think my favorite song would be oh my god, I just had the name and then I forgot it. But regardless, oh, Music Response, that was the name of it. Anyway, but this album sort of just eh, I like the electronics somewhat, but or the instrumental somewhat, but they're just kind of everywhere and not really memorable or really anything that I would say would be improving or getting worse. It's just sort of a middle ground where everything's okay, but everything isn't horrible at the same time. I don't know. Anyway. And now we enter Push the Button, which came out in 2005, again, another 3 years later. 11 tracks and 60 minutes, which is pretty long. And this is the album I would say that actually did fully break out of just the UK scene and actually did enter here in the US. And like I said, it had a lot of fame, particularly around one song, which, if you don't know the song, it's Galvanize, and that's just a great song in general. Um, Honestly, one of the first songs that really got them into a bigger audience, although I would say that all the previous albums had a really good audience too of their fans in the UK, but definitely here they just added and just boomed like so much, and definitely a really good album, but at the same time, uh, it has a lot of vocals, Galvanized being one of those that are just again okay. I wouldn't say they're like Surrenders where a lot of the vocals I don't really like. Here I would say the vocals are just kind of neutral or sometimes really good. A lot more basis on like rap sort of, or rather hip hop sort of vocals. But otherwise, a really good album. Listening through the whole thing was great. I liked a lot of the songs, a lot more than I thought I would. And I'd listen to it again gladly. It's a really good album. And now we start to enter the weird part of their career, which I would say is their most recent. Starting off with the album We Are the Night, came out in 2007, has 12 tracks, and is a total of 59 minutes. Again, almost basically an hour long album. Um, I don't know how to explain this album. It's sort of like they went back to using a lot more of their heavy percussions on their tracks and a lot more of those kind of samples. But their style of instrumentals, as far as like the synthesizers and all the keyboard and sort of electronic based sounds, are more so lighthearted or not so hard hitting, which is what I know the Chemical Brothers more so for, and what I like them more for. Here they're just kind of, I don't know how to explain, more smooth. They're not as gritty or hard hitting as they were before. They're starting to smooth things out, and it just starts to get a little weird. And yeah, I don't know. It's a okay album if you're into more of an EDM scene, but if you're a fan of the Chemical Brothers, if you've listened to any like of their older, like if you even like Galvanized and that's the only song you know from the Chemical Brothers, this is an album that I would say is just a little weird. But then again, maybe give it a try. Maybe you'll end up liking it more than I did. But and this trend of sort of the weird music continues on even with this next album, Further, which came out in 2010, has 10 tracks, total 51 minutes long. One of their shorter albums. Yeah, again, continuing on with this sort of somewhat heavy percussions and they're really good samples that they would use mixed with these more mellowed out, smoother electronica sounds as opposed to being hard hitting and grimy, like I said before. Uh, yeah, there's really no improvement or change from We Are the Night aside from maybe actually a little less of those samples of the samples that they would have used back in the day. Um, Again, just another kind of neutral album where I just am like I don't really like the sound, but I don't know. Like I said, if you're into the more new, if you're into something like, sadly, I have to compare the Chemical Brothers to like Calvin Harris or something like that. Um, I would definitely say it's probably a little more for you, but I can't get behind these albums. Um, yeah, next album. And now we're at their last and most recent album, Born in the Echoes, which came out in 2015. Has 11 tracks and 52 minutes. Again, another one of their shorter ones. Just again, with the same kind of idea. Although, a couple more tracks with vocals and features that aren't necessarily, put in, but obviously with the same idea. Um, just a lot of the same again. More EDM and more mellowed out and smooth electronica as opposed to what I would like from them. And I don't know if that's maybe just a product of the fact that they're, getting older. Obviously, this album being Born in the Echoes being 20 years after Exit Planet Dust, and who knows how many, or well, someone probably knows, but some more than 20 years after they just started, their whole career. Again, another album that did sort of break out here in the U.S. as well, aside from the U.K. But even here, it sort of did okay. There's nothing really much to say because again, much like the last two, Further and We Are the Night, it's just a furthering of this sort of style that I'm okay with, but I don't necessarily like. Um, yeah, there's nothing really else to say other than it kind of sucks to see them go down this path, which I didn't really expect them to. But I mean, what can you expect? It's just like I said, a product of time. Eventually, you have to change and sort of get used to having newer audiences, especially with the Chemical Brothers. They started to get big in Japan as well, and they would do a lot of live shows with a lot of this music and some of their old music. But yeah, and we also actually have a bonus album. While Born in the Echoes is their most oh, excuse me. While Born in the Echoes is their most recent album, I do want to backtrack a little bit and take a bit of a time travel to go back to a certain album, which I think can sort of answer a lot of questions. While I typically don't take a look at any other album besides the main studio albums and that's it, Hannah just happened to be a movie that I had watched just before I decided to listen to all of the studio albums from the Chemical Brothers, and I found out that they actually did all of the music for the movie. So Hannah came out in 2011, as did the soundtrack. A total of 20 tracks, all summing up to about 50 minutes. Obviously, the movie using it sparingly or stretching it out or repeating it or whatever. Um, Honestly, I would say that Hannah, while not being a studio, well, the soundtrack I should say, not the movie, but the soundtrack for Hannah is what I would say touches the closest to their past while also fusing their more recent stuff together really well, which is the oddest thing on the planet because you would think that would also transfer over to their main studio albums, but somehow that doesn't. Um, the movie is something I would say is okay. I really wouldn't listen to it or watch the movie. It's just an okay movie. I wanted to like it more, but it isn't. Um, but that's touching into my movie side, and I'll leave that be. Um, but the album, or the soundtrack, I should say, really well done, really nicely composed by the Chemical Brothers. Um, when like if you're just listening to the soundtrack and not watching the movie, you can definitely tell when action is happening, or when something intense is going on, or when we're sort of taking a moment to like just rest and just kind of think about what's going on, or just sort of to take a breather from like all the action and stuff. You can definitely tell when that's coming, and like I said, it's a perfect fusion of their old percussion style to their newer mellowed out style, and it's really nice. I actually really like the album. There's a couple songs on there that I just love, and I didn't even think I would like any of the songs on the album, to be completely honest. But yeah, that about wraps up all the albums. And my final thoughts are just that while the Chemical Brothers have definitely gone far for a little longer than 20 years now, um, I don't really see them ever stopping. Um, I would love to see them do more music for other movies, especially, even if it's not just action movies exclusively, but obviously their style fits more for action movies. I would definitely love to see them do more soundtracks, although I can understand that being a little hard. But regardless, the Chemical Brothers are honestly pretty harmless, and most of the times, most people don't really know who they are. And I guess this is more so just an episode to try to spread a little more of who they are and what their music was and what their albums are. I'm looking forward to any new releases from them. I have heard of a couple new songs that were supposedly going to be coming out this year, being 2018. Um, I don't know though. It's all really up to them, the Chemical Brothers, who are ironically really not brothers, but you know that doesn't matter. Yeah, that about wraps up the episode. So thank you for watching. If you liked the video, go ahead and give it a thumbs up. If you didn't like the video, go ahead and give it a thumbs down. Um, Again, sorry for the whole situation with the the podcast group. Of course, again, if you want to check them out, I will leave a link in the description this one time. Um, if there's any artists or bands or groups or whatever that you want to hear me talk about here on the discography discussion, go ahead and leave it down in the comments below. I gladly am taking any suggestions, because it's definitely nice to hear what other people would like for me to hear, and of course know that I'm open to any genre except country. I do not like country. Country is so bad. Um, yeah. If there's anything I could change, go ahead and also tell me in the comments down below. Maybe something you didn't like. Yeah, I hear you out there. Again, thank you for watching. Oh, if you want, also, down in the description, any updates for new episodes of the show, or any updates about the show in general, or if I'm just telling you, hey, new episode, you can do it. You can follow my Twitter, which is down in the description. God, I keep saying that. You can follow my Twitter for, like I said, updates, new episodes, anything. It'll always be pinned to the top, so you don't absolutely have to follow. Just make sure to take a look, just in case something might have happened and like, oh crap, I can't record this week's episode. Yeah. Other than that, I'll see you in 2 weeks on the next Sunday for a very, very special uh, artist. And by special, I mean everyone probably knows who they are.